in the upper bracket with an extra chance versus lower bracket, best of one, and only one chance at any point going forward into the tournament of TI5. He talked a little bit about the previous matchup. We didn't get to really see that match from here, the foyer, because it was, I believe, the end of day 2 or something like that. We do have some highlights, so we'll take a look at that. But overall, I remember Winter, we were talking about it, and Empire just looked very happy after that match. Of course, it was their first match win, but they seemed really elated. Let's take a look at some of the highlights from their previous matchup in a best-of-2 in Group B, VP versus Empire.
I also wonder if it plays effect at all. These two teams probably scrim against each other,
Right.
Iron sharpens iron, they say, and maybe it's a matchup that they're comfortable with, being able to take advantage of. Adds more to that high morale, being able to come into this matchup against Virtus Pro.
And the other thing, we're also having to look at the picks here, something to consider what they've played against each other before, and it looks like Empire got quite a few high-priority picks.
The Naga is probably going to be a big key ban/pick in this series, I would imagine.
Let's say a hero to highlight where it seems like Empire are really at their best out of all the games we've seen is when Resolution gets this Dragon Knight. If I'm VP, I second phase ban that, no matter what, unless it's very, very clear that Resolution's hero has been picked in the first 2, which is never really a given, I think, because the cores that generally get picked in the first phase are Gyro and Quap, and Gyro will not be played by Resolution, and the Quap could easily also be played by Silent in the safe lane. So it seems like they play with a lot of confidence. He's a frontliner, he has a targeted stun. This is the goal call that we rally around. That's a big pick. I think Undying will be a big pick for both teams as well. And most likely we will see both of them picked or banned.
Looking at that clip, it looks like there were, it was 40-something and then 33 kills combined. That's nearly 80 kills in that game. Sure, it went on for a little bit, but...
Sounds like Bounty would be good for some track calls.
Sounds like it was a bit of a bloodbath. So if that's going to come into play, of course, something to consider. Dakota, how much do you think it's going to matter that VP got to see this last match? Sure, you're maybe reminded of the acts and things like that, but in Game 1, it was also that a lot of picks were open. Lesh was given up and something like that.
I agree. I feel like Game 1, it was more they were able to take the advantage of grabbing up the Lesh and building around that, and in Game 2, it was seeing the Brood, being able to counter around that, and just adjusting their playstyle on the fly. I don't think they had to pull out anything secretive or any do-or-die grabs, something that we saw from EG earlier. So I would imagine it shouldn't affect Virtus Pro too much at this point. I think, like I said before, these teams probably have a lot of experience going head-to-head, and they should know what to expect from each other.
Yeah. And Winter, what are your thoughts going into this rematch, we could say?
I think whoever wins the coin... I think we're going to do a coin toss again. I feel like the sides and whoever gets first pick is very crucial as well. Maybe I would personally favor the side that goes to Dire, in the sense that both of the teams are very similar playstyle. They are fighting a lot, and I feel Roshan could be the deciding factor. Being on the Dire side, easier access to Roshan, and maybe you can even build a lineup around the Rosh so you can actually get access to it easy by picking a TA or any form of minus armor. So curious to see who picks what when they win the coin toss. I think that would be really crucial.
Yeah.
And both teams do play the TA, so that is definitely a pick that's up for grabs. Another thing I believe we haven't mentioned is the progress in the other series. I'm not sure if we talked about that.
No, we haven't. No,
so CDIC versus eHome is still going, and I think the last update we gave was that CDIC were leading, but they were ahead 15-6, but the score was a little bit deceptive relative to how the game was going, and guess what? eHome actually did win that game.
There you go.
This game currently 5-6, eHome with 5, CDEC with 6. Looks like CDEC might be taking Roshan right now. This is another close game, and it's really important because if eHome wins, they get first seed in the group.
Yes.
Which is something, no matter what, no one would have expected either eHome or CDEC, I think, to get first. But eHome actually has a shot at it here.
Yeah, so eHome really, we were seeing kind of a dream run on day 4 of the group stages, but just one step away from making it happen. That game is still going on. It's Game 2 for them, so the very last game for either team. No matter how this goes on, they are done on the top side of Group B. Of course, Group A is all wrapped up also. But eHome, will they get first seed, or will they just be content with making it finally into that top 4 of Group B? We're about to find out. And now, of course, just look at the standings also. Group A was all settled. Group B, somewhat settled. But let's review Group A a little bit before we go into this tiebreaker. Are there any results that were pretty surprising going, now that we look at it fully in hindsight? Or do you think Group A was actually played out a little bit more like most people might have expected? Barring one or two games that might have been dropped, but in terms of match and series results.
Can I say it didn't end the way it started? Can I say that?
Yeah.
You think it's fair?
that
Well,
surprising?
you can say
Yeah.
that. I mean, I won't block you from saying it.
That is not allowed.
Wrong face. Wrong choice of words.
Number one surprise in Group A is complexity.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Yes.
Getting top four.
Yeah.
That is the absolute success story. I guess number two surprise is IG finishing last. I think they did. Or did they? No, they got ahead of Navi.
Navi finished last.
So Navi last, IG second to last.
Yes.
I saw an image earlier today with like the defending champions.
Oh, yeah.
IG, Navi, and Newbie are all like at the absolute bottom of the group.
Yeah.
So that's something I think a lot of people wouldn't have expected. You would expect at least one of
True.
those teams to do very well, but hasn't been the case. Hopefully they can rise to the occasion at the main event, at least one of them. So.
Yeah, granted, I mean, both Navi and Newbie, people didn't have too many high hopes coming in, but at the same time, people were saying, well, Navi, they tend to perform suddenly, like when people least expected, when it most matters, they do turn that switch on. Of course, Newbie people, after the first year, were like, oh, actually, they're a lot better than we expected them to be, so maybe we can't underestimate them anymore. Same thing with IG, but at the end of the day, at the end of the week, they are now in the bottom half of both of their respective groups, so that's how it panned out. But yeah, you bring up a good point. Complexity, probably the biggest surprise for everyone, and as we keep mentioning, I mean, the Friedman brothers and all of their teams said, we're here to prove everyone wrong, and that motivates us a lot, and it seems like that fire is still burning, and they're willing to just push through to the very end.
I think the very big thing and strongest aspect of the team is they have a lot of different picks compared to the rest, and they are not afraid to use something that is maybe sort of out of the meta slightly. And we've been talking about teams they need the surprise factor. You can't just play a normal game against the stronger team. So I feel a lot of their positive results came from the surprise factor against the much more formidable opponents they had in the group stages, picking something out of maybe their opponent's comfort zone, and the opponents are just not ready to deal with it during the 2-game series itself.
We've seen them pick, excuse me, they've played Centaur on Moon Meander. I think they're the only team. My Empire, I think, picked one game as well.
Yeah, there was like one other game, I think, one or two, yeah.
I think
so-
there was another game as well today.
Oh, I think Navi.
I remember
also?
seeing...
Navi was
Navi.
Navi.
Yeah.
It was
Navi
Navi.
picked
You're right.
Centaur,
So I
yeah.
guess we're talking about the same game. So, yeah, they've picked Centaur from Moon Meander. They've picked Prophet from Moon Meander.
Enigma as well.
They have played Enigma on, I believe it's been
The
Fly.
support.
Or
The other guy.
Z-Freak, yeah. Z-Freak on the Enigma. They've picked Sven, I think both with and without Wisp for was that also for Ziz, so I believe in both games.
They pulled out the techies, of course.
Techies.
Yeah,
they-
that's true.
They even
A
played...
year ago would have been really, or not a year ago, because a year ago he wasn't in the game. A few months ago would have been like, wow, they picked techies. But
Right,
in this
at this
tournament, it's
point.
kind of, like, it's not a very normal pick, but it's also not crazy. Like, it's more crazy to pick a Sven than a techies.
I mean,
Yeah.
is it a crazy normal pick right now?
it's not crazy.
Like,
normal, but
I think coming in, obviously, that was kind of the joke, right? Everyone said, we want to see more techies. Obviously, for viewers, it's always kind of exciting how that changes the game. And it's, I guess for viewers, when you're not on the receiving end, it's always satisfying to see someone get blown up by a bunch of mines. But we saw it quite frequently. So I'm in agreement with Sin here saying that it's not exactly crazy. It is still situational, but at the
Yes.
same time, it's definitely like a high situational pick rather than something like only 2 teams have prepared or something like that coming into TI5.
I'm very curious about complexity on how they're going to be when it's key arena time. I was very impressed with how they're able to perform here on LAN. Like I said before, I know like Ziz in particular never had been at a LAN. This is his first LAN. For some of their other players, they've been to LANs for other MOBAs, but not Dota. And I feel like you come into this kind of event as it is right now, and maybe they look at it like we don't have a whole lot to lose. People are probably looking down on us. You know, they're expecting that we're not going to be able to do good, so we can just give it our all. And it's worked out for them so far. But then you get to Key Arena, people are screaming, they're yelling, the pressure's there. You realize that this one win is the difference between, you know, having 6 figures and 7 figures. It can get crazy. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be probably the biggest test ever.
Yeah, that is a very true point. Very different environment, of course, than here during the group stages. But let's come back to this one. We're looking at the team profiles. One more match left for Group B. Well, of course, the other game's still going on, but one more series to start here. It's going to be between Virtus Pro and Empire. Do you think at this point there's any outside factors to consider, whether it's the niche picks or anything, or both teams just have to say, you know what, give it our all, one last game, it's just on us? Like, let's not try to get into all these mind games in the draft and also in game.
I think so both teams have not had as strong a showing as they were hoping for, and perhaps that means that the motivation going into the game is just, okay, they know there's a reason they're playing in this relegation match for fourth, if you will.
Okay, yeah.
So maybe you just stick with your like really solid picks, like for example what I mentioned, Resolutions, Dragon Knight, Virtus Pro. I haven't got to see so many of Virtus Pro's games, I think, so I'm not completely sure what they've been running a lot and what's been successful for them. But there's absolutely no doubt we're going to get action-packed games. I don't think it's going to be a slow kind of game. These teams don't play like that.
To adapt. But that, in some ways, complicates things in one way. At the other end, of course, you can think of it as, well, if we lose the first game, we have another shot to come back and tie it up and go for that last game. Winter, what about you? What are your thoughts in this matchup? What do you think they want to focus on the most?
I think what they want to focus more successful rotations to help the mid would be really crucial in that matchup itself, because both of the mid players of the teams are really explosive players. If you just give them a slight head start, they can actually dominate and control the game by themselves. So I think that's a very key factor.
Axe, they have plenty of other tricks up their sleeves, and I hope they don't get too caught up in, let's make sure we get that Lesh and Gyro and Naga, and don't be afraid to kind of get a bit more creative.
Right. Yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of options here to maybe see some picks we haven't yet or not as often.
I think I remember seeing Virtus Pro or Empire. They have picked. I think it was Virtus Pro. More or less, they picked Warlock for Illidan. He played a safe lane or mid Warlock in the past.
Yes.
And it's really good. Warlock is a pick that's really good when the playstyle is constantly fighting. And when you fight, you want to take Warlock. It's like you win the fight, you take objective. So it's very good in the matter of the fact that if the teams are fighting constantly, it's a good pick in that regard.
The downside of that, though, is if the fights are too frequent.
Yeah, too frequent.
It's a very long cooldown also.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of the reason that it's not being picked right now. It's just that
the long cooldown.
It's just such a long cooldown, and a lot of the times you see the chaotic offering maybe setting up 1 kill, maybe 2. But as long as it's like a somewhat even trade, the enemy team can just take full advantage of it, because Warlock a lot of the times just really weak without the ult.
If you don't take a tower, it feels like it's not worth dropping the golem. That's how I feel about it. Like, if once you drop the golem, you commit, you have to get an objective. If you don't get an objective, you must make sure you get a lot of kills, which sometimes doesn't happen. You drop it for a key kill on the carry, and you don't get an objective. It feels like it's not worth it at the end of the day.
That's what I feel like. Instead, they'd go for what could kind of fill those shoes, but be a safer pick in like a DK, being able to utilize his ultimate to get objectives and take fights, whereas Warlock could be a bit too spicy.
Right. But at the same time, I guess it also depends, right? Are you already up a game? Do you want to go strong in the very first game?
But the Dragon Knight, it feels like Dragon Knight is weak in the lane, though. So I mentioned a lot of it will come down to their mid play. Whoever gets the better start in the mid lane, and Dragon Knight is weaker at the start, so it might actually play to the fact that giving the opponent a better lane, better lane matchup, let's say Queen of Pain versus Dragon Knight, it will allow maybe G to have a better start and then snowball his team like into a much stronger mid game. So I feel Dragon Knight has his merits, but at the same time he's weak. He's weaker, a lot weaker at the start in the lane. So there's still a negative part of the pick itself.
Right. I mean, because you guys are mentioning, well, it's probably going to be an action-packed game anyway. At that point, in some ways, the lane phase could matter more, because whoever's going to be a little bit ahead can start just taking charge and taking initiative and causing those actions to happen, and the snowball could start rolling very early on for sure. Now, going in then, both teams are already in the lobby. Now, one last question from my end, just something curious. How worth it is it to, if you had, let's assume that both teams have just one strategy, they were like, we're going to save this till we absolutely need it, or like, let's say it's like the finals and one game away from the championship. This is what